окупанти до нас в Україну. Форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back.
And of course, we are going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, because we've got a lot going on today. As some of y'all may have heard, the Ukrainians do be wildin'. They do be going absolutely ham. And not only that, they are bringing home the turkey. I'm telling you that. We got to see that the Ukrainians were able to strike Russian bases throughout pretty much the entirety of Ukrainian-occupied territory, and also inside of the Russian Federation today, critically devastating, if not destroying some of these bases outright, and causing a serious amount of damage. And we also got some really big news from the Partisans further inside of Ukraine, where we can see that they're doing a little bit of big business. But we're going to be covering all that here tonight, and also we'll be covering the once, not really shocking, but once again, another day of Russian failures on the front line. No real advances being made by the attacking Russian forces, which is a good sign. But we have loads to cover. As many of y'all know, there's been some things that have been going on and going around out there. And before we even get into the major breaking news of the night, I think it's important that we talk about one clip that I saw today, because it was a gun camera that was supposedly showing an F-16 in flight over southern Ukraine shooting down a Russian Su-34 bomber. Now, that sounds really exciting. And I'm sure that many people have probably seen that clip, because it looks like it was making the rounds about an hour and a half before we came on air. I hate to say it, the Ukrainian F-16s are not in the air yet. We haven't even heard any official news that they are airborne at all, or even inside of Ukraine at this moment. That video is fake. It is from DCS World, and they ended up dolling up the footage to try and make it look like it was actual combat footage. It is a video game. It's not real. I hate to say it. We're going to be waiting for actual evidence and confirmed footage, but I wanted to make sure to share that with y'all, so that way, in case if y'all did see it, y'all wouldn't be like, oh my god, the F-16s are finally there. They're not there at the moment. It was a video game.
Who put the video out?
Uh-huh.
Who put the video out?
I saw it circling around a little bit on Twitter and a great deal on Reddit today, and I went, uh-oh. I was like, this is not good. People are taking the cake. It's kind of like when people took the cake of that Su-27 flying past the drone, if you remember that, Matthew, which was also made in like some kind of a computer simulation system. Or way back in the early part of the war when people were like, oh my god, it's the Ghost of Kyiv! And then it was literally DCS World footage, that people were playing, passing off as real war footage. You know what? Really quickly, let me go see if I can find that footage, because I'll show it to y'all. I don't have it as a marker on the map, because I do not want to put that in our actual news bulletins, but let me go grab it and show it to y'all, so that way y'all know what is fake. So let me see if I can go find it. Well, on the bright side, it looks like they already smacked it down off of Reddit, at least where I saw it. It looks like it's already been deleted and removed, so that's good. That's a good sign, because it looks like it's being cleaned up already. But I just wanted to share that little public safety announcement with all of y'all, because if you see it, it's not real. The F-16s are not there yet. That is not confirmed footage. That is a video game. And I just have to say that like for the third time, because I want to make sure that everyone leaves tonight with at least one good thing, which is knowing that that video is fake. And hopefully we'll get to see a real F-16's gun camera in the future, but not for now. In the meantime, however, we did get to see that the Ukrainians went back to hammering Belgorod. It sounds like the air raid bells were garroting over the city of Belgorod, because we got to hear the arrival of these nice, fantastic munitions tonight. Here's the clip. When you see the car alarms already going off. Oh! Right in the middle of the street, actually. It's a little smoky. It appears that no one was in the area. It appears to be some kind of a car parking lot, but the video clip ends there. We don't really know what that was. It's something exploding in relations to the Ukrainians attacking the city of Belgorod again. We don't know if that was an actual drone. We don't know if it was a missile or a part of a surface-to-air missile that ended up, falling off, well, the booster falling off and then colliding with the parking lot. We don't really know what it was, but still, pretty interesting. See, at the same time, we also got to hear the sound of the air defenses at work over the city of Belgorod. Take a listen. You hear the sounds of the air defense out there just pounding away. And from what
What's air defense doing, though? I mean, is it working?
From what we know, it kind of did and it kind of didn't. We think the interception rate was somewhere around 55 to 60% during this particular attack, but a decent amount of the Ukrainian drones that were coming in did make it to their targets, but it wasn't the majority of them like last time. This time, it sounds as though it may have actually been the minority of their equipment, or more so their drones, were able to make it to their targets. But this is kind of the warm-up. This is actually the appetizer, as they call it in those fancy restaurants where they have appetizers. This is only a small part of what happened today as far as Ukrainian attacks go. In fact, there were far larger attacks that were occurring over the entirety of Crimea today than really anywhere. And this is really where the meat of the major news about the Ukrainians attacking all Russian bases comes from. From the video and picture evidence that we have, Russian bases along practically the entire length of the western seaboard of Crimea, and not only that, but also within central Crimea as well, were attacked and hit today. And there is enough video and picture evidence out there to back up that these clips and pictures and this statement is as true as it can be. We're going to be moving into our first little bit of news, where we got to see some citizens living within occupied Crimea showing that the air defense was going off and that there were Ukrainian drones flying through the skies.
Что пролетела ракета.
Ракета, блядь.
Рядом ПВО не отработала. Одну цель сбили сверху, вон она. А что-то все-таки попало.
He sounds kind of blown away.
Это у нас район 5-го километра, наверное. Капец.
Silent contemplation. Moving on from that clip, which does confirm that there were Ukrainian drones airborne, and moving on to our next one, we got to see that some explosions started to happen again near the Saki airfield. Here's the clip. You see the camera looking into the distance, and we can see the bright flashes of drones hitting their targets on the airfield's tarmac. That clip ended pretty quickly, and I gotta say, I love the watermark that says, let's see, it says, Krymsku Vimmer. I don't know what that means, like Crimean something, but anyways, moving on from that little clip and on into our next one near Yevpatoria, we also got to see, well, actually, I'll get to that in a second. We got to see that there was a fire inside of the town of Yevpatoria. Some smoke coming up from a street or two over. Someone's barbecuing. And it just isn't anything barbecuing, it's that pulled orc that everybody likes. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, a Russian command center, the Strategic Communications Department of the General Staff of Ukraine, said that they struck a command post of the Russian occupation troops near Sevastopol. From what we were able to gather, this command post was actually inside the area of Yevpatoria and not in the city of Sevastopol. But there was the translation right there, and here is the original post made by the Ukrainian SBU, which is the Armed Forces of Ukraine. While we're checking that out, it's time for us to move on down into this general clip here, where we got to see a montage of pictures from the multiple attacks that happened. We can see here the MLRS rockets that were fired by drone today into the port of Sevastopol, and that's a little news. Sadly, we don't have any videos of those drones firing off their MLRSs from outside of the harbor, but we do have this picture right here, and if I can find those videos in the future, we'll make sure to show them to y'all. In the next picture, we can see Sevastopol once again. In the next one after that, we got to see above Simferopol, which Simferopol is actually in the dead center of the Crimean Peninsula right there, and about 70 to 80 miles away from Sevastopol, so a very large distance in between the two cities, and indicating that Ukrainian attacks were happening over the entire area of the peninsula in between Simferopol and Sevastopol. Moving on from that picture, we can also see something burning inside the city of Sevastopol, although we don't know what it is at the moment. We're still trying to get more information and news about what's on fire inside that city and what's truly been destroyed. And also, apparently, this was from the heights near Balaclava. You know, some people know Balaclava for different things. Some people know it because their bank got robbed. Some people know it because these guys called the IRA were running around in Northern Ireland for a little bit wearing the things. Some people know it as a town inside of Crimea. And the one that we're talking about tonight is a town inside of Crimea. It's just north of Sevastopol, just by a little bit. I think it's somewhere up in this general area. But we'll have to make sure and double check that here in a little bit. But nevertheless, the Ukrainians truly did attack pretty much the entirety of the Crimean Peninsula today at as many Russian bases as they could, and hopefully they've caused some serious damage. Of course, when attacks are fresh like these and only a few hours old, the information that we have about what kind of damage was caused to the Russian armed forces is actually fairly limited. And we don't really know the extent of the damage or the extent of hindrance that's going to be caused to Russian forces that are operating out of the city of, well, not the city of Sevastopol, but the peninsula of Crimea. At the moment, we're still trying to get information on that, and we'll probably be able to give you all an update on the actual damage that was caused by these Ukrainian attacks tomorrow. In the meantime, however, I think it is important to talk about something that we are able to confirm as a proof of destruction. Way out in the far-off lands of Chelyabinsk, on the other side of the Ural mountain range. Just in case y'all didn't know, the Ural mountain range, which is this very thick green line or belt that kind of goes all the way north to south across Russia, is the geographical divide in between Europe and Asia in this part of the continent, or the supercontinent more so. It is actually where the divide is, and once you cross these mountains, you enter Asia. And so Yekaterinburg and Chelyabinsk are actually inside of the continent of Asia. They're not European cities. They're Asian cities, funnily enough. But what's also really cool about that, you know, just as like a geographical thing for Russia, is that Yekaterinburg is the third largest city by population in the Russian Federation, right behind Moscow and St. Petersburg, with not Moscow being number 1, St. Petersburg being number 2, and Yekaterinburg being number 3. And what's just bizarre about that is that that actually makes Yekaterinburg the largest Russian town in Asia, which is kind of a cool fact about Yekaterinburg. But moving on from that, it's time for us to get down to Chelyabinsk. And I'm going to share with y'all a couple of fun facts about Chelyabinsk as well, because Chelyabinsk is a very interesting place, and some of y'all may know this if you're into nuclear disaster history, some of y'all may not. And if you haven't heard about this, this may be a big shock. Chelyabinsk is actually where the first nuclear disaster ever happened in the world, and that was in the 1950s, like 1957. Did you know that, Matthew?
I did not.
Well, now you do. Way back in the day, the were using Chelyabinsk, and specifically Chelyabinsk 40, which is pretty much the postal code, so they just named the town after the next major city nearby, and then the postal code. But Chelyabinsk 40 was a closed town that way back in the day was being used pretty much entirely for Soviet nuclear and atomic programs. And what they would do back in the day, because, you know, the Russians are very smart and always concerned for the environment, is that they take the nuclear waste and they dump them into the surrounding lakes nearby. And they would just leave it there. They never took it out. It's still there to this day, and it ended up causing a massive radiological issue where the radioactive contamination became so bad that right outside the city, they ended up having to evacuate something like 10 to 12,000 people and execute every single animal that they could find, and also burn every single building to the ground and try and bury them. And that was all the way back in the late 50s. You would think that the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation, or more so the Federative Soviet Republic of Russia, whatever it was called at the time, would have learned that nuclear power is something that can end up being dangerous, and the radiological contamination could end up causing harm to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or millions of people. They would not learn, and then Chernobyl would happen about 20 to 30 years later. But outside of that fun fact about Chelyabinsk, Chelyabinsk is also home to some Russian military air bases. We can actually see the Flughafen Chelyabinsk right there, which is the civilian airport for the city of Chelyabinsk.
Flughafen. Well, the German mixed in there all of a sudden.
Man, this airport is Geschlick Malaikman in den Deutschen Wolken 3, and then it's Bliet, Suka Bliet at 4. You know, it's gotta get both of them, an even mix. And also, this looks like it was a two-runway airfield at one point, but then they converted it pretty much into just one, and then made the second runway a taxiway. But nevertheless, this airport is kind of sad, but this isn't the one we're talking about. We're actually talking about this little military airfield over here on the other side of the city. You can actually see some of those Su-34 fighter bombers right there sitting on the tarmac. And as y'all know, everyone in Russia is not pro-Russian or pro-Putin for that matter. Some of them are not. And some of them like to do things to help out the Ukrainian war effort. And it appears that some very heroic partisans were able to do that as they threw a Molotov cocktail under an Su-34 and possibly ended up roasting the thing to the ground. Here's the clip We see the Molotov burning under the Su-34 right there. And what is just so bizarre to me is that this war has been going on for 2 years now. The Russians have lost, from what we know, at least 6 or 7 aircraft from partisan activity on the runways. And their airport security, or more so their airfield security, is still so bad. These guys can just walk up to a plane on the tarmac and just set the thing on fire, and no one's around to stop them. Pretty wild, pretty insane stuff. The silence is piercing my soul, but nevertheless, the silence of this flame as it continues to crackle under this Su-34 and burn up its internals here hopefully soon is a good thing. We can also see that the Russian security for this airfield is so non-existent. This guy is literally just sitting here and posing for the picture. We see the fire right there. It's actually burning inside one of the air intakes. Pretty cool stuff. And we just got called pure propaganda by a Russian bot. And I gotta thank all of y'all for watching this pure propaganda. If you enjoy our raw propaganda, hit that freaking like button. Because you know what it does? It helps to promote our propaganda to others. Go on. You know you want to.
We are proudly propaganda. Pro-Ukraine, pro-Western, pro-democracy, and pro-down with Putin. Am I right? Or am I right?
Man, you right. You double right, man. You get it, man. Get him, baby. But anyways, moving on from Chelyabinsk, where it's great to see that an Su-34 has taken some fire damage. It's time for us to move towards Moscow. Because this is something interesting that the British Ministry of Defense finally enlightened me on today. And it's one of the few times I have to say that the British Ministry of Defense has talked about something that we didn't cover days ago. And this is something that's fairly new and something that I didn't really know about, so I'm going to share this with y'all because I just found it very interesting. In November of 2022, way back, over a year ago at this point, the president of the Russian Federation approved the establishment of the Moscow Government Security Force, MGSF, a new organization to guard the capital's infrastructure. From July 2023, the MGSF or SS more so, has assumed a more paramilitary character, including receiving a permit or a remit to use firearms. It has likely attracted several thousand recruits out of a planned strength of 15,000, which means it's about the size of 3 full Western brigades. At least that's the planned strength. The MGSF represents another example in Russia's long tradition of paramilitarization, like partisans and stuff like that. The proliferation of armed organizations outside of the regular military, which is kind of odd because didn't they say that the Wagner was an illegal group because there's no armed forces inside of Russia rather than the Russian military and the police? And now they're going, oh yeah, let's create another paramilitary organization to guard the capital.
Why don't they just use the military?
That's a good question. I don't know why they wouldn't use the military, but apparently they...
That was a rhetorical question, actually. You know why they don't use them?
Why?
Because they all dead.
That's cool. I like it. Man, I like that one. But anyways, the MGSS, I'm just going to call them the MGSS from now on, y'all, because it's kind of true, and also at the same time, for some reason, I just can't say MGSF, but has highly likely been strengthened partially in response to concerns about the preparedness of Moscow's local security forces in the face of advancing mutinous Wagner Group troops in June of 2023. The project also provides an opportunity for Muscovites to volunteer for patriotic wartime duties while avoiding frontline service in Ukraine. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin has been successful in limiting the direct impact of the conflict on the capital's relatively well-off population. And that's relative for the Russians. The majority of Russian casualties in Ukraine have come from poor provincial regions, and particularly down in the Caucasus Mountain region. Or the Caucasus Mountain region, I got that correct. But the mountain region down there is where we see a lot of the recruits coming from, or way out in areas like Tanatuva, which is a small little, it looks big, but it's actually quite small. Right about here. That's where a decent amount of them come from as well. But nevertheless, it does sound like the Russians are getting a little nifty again with the paramilitary groups, and I'm sure that's going to come back to bite them pretty badly. Another thing that's really interesting about the city of Moscow, and this is something that may also be an interesting fact to everyone as well, is that the city of Moscow was not this large. It all the way up until about the 1920s, Moscow practically existed entirely within this ring road right here that you see in yellow. Moscow was not a huge city by any means, and in fact, it was not until the 1960s that the urban population of the the modern-day Russian Federation would finally surpass the size of the rural population by percentage. Not a lot of people lived in cities, and the massive blossoming of the size of Moscow really came under the reign of Stalin from the post-World War II era, and also just a little bit before that, really from like 1936 until his death in 1953, and then under Khrushchev's reign over the next 9 years after that. That's when Moscow really grew to the size it was, because one, to get people into the city means that the central government is able to have a lot more control over them. It's really hard for a centralized communist government like the Soviet Union's to exercise authority over sparsely populated areas in the rural countryside. So it's much better to take a lot of these people and to just move them into 1 or 2 major cities. And that's why you'll see that Moscow has 11 million people living in it, which is 10% of the entire population of the Russian Federation inside of one single city. Another thing that's really interesting about that is that this was an attempt by the Russians to try and industrialize as rapidly as possible. And their idea was that if they moved a massive amount of people into one city, this would be able to set off a chain reaction industrially within this area and help the Russians, or more so the Soviet Union at the time, to try and pick up the speed and start to match the Western nations and their abilities. That never really panned out all too well. The Soviet Union would outproduce the United States in steel production for a while. I believe it was around 2 to 3 decades, but they would be usurped in the 70s, and they never recovered after that. And of course, after the collapse, they are certainly never recovering from that. But another thing that's really interesting about Moscow is that its roadworks and structures are not that effective. You know, just to kind of share with y'all a couple of interesting facts about Moscow, the roads are a little bit odd. They're a lot like Parisian roads in that they almost have no real sense behind them. And the only place that you'll find a real sense of a grid structure is way out in the areas that were built in the 50s and 60s, like you can see right here. These were built off of a grid structure under the reign of Khrushchev. This entire area was. But before that, the road structure was pretty hectic because, of course, it was a medieval era city and the roads didn't really have a grid structure to work off of, and grid-structured cities were very rare to come by until about the mid-1700s, and then we saw them come back into being, especially here in the United States and other countries around the world that ended up having a lot of British influence on them. But beyond that, just some interesting facts about Moscow to let y'all know what kind of a world that this little paramilitary group is going to be living in. But moving on from those interesting little side notes about the city of Moscow, it's time for us to get on into Ukraine again and talk about what's going on down there. Because there is still a very interesting amount of things going on there. And really quickly, because we only have one news clip about this today, I'm going to be taking y'all down into the area of the southern Dnipro River to talk about what we're seeing right now. And it's not really much, at least in video evidence and combat. In proof of combat. It seems as though the fighting in this area may have slowed on both sides for a while. It looks like the Russian VDV division that was moved to the area of Korsunka or Obrivka has completely stopped trying to push into Krynky and retake it. It appears that they are now entirely entirely suited or preparing to try and defend the forests right outside of Krynky to its south. And it also appears like the Ukrainian Marine brigades that find themselves inside of Krynky are also not trying to push out as well. And this may be a moment for them to try and rearm, bring in reinforcements, evacuate wounded, and also prepare for the next phase of fighting. So for now, it appears that there may be a lull in the fighting near the Dnipro River. We have a feeling that this is most likely not going to be permanent because many war analysts, and especially myself, see that there is a lot of potential for future offensives, wildly successful offensives, if this area is conducted accordingly or to the proper way. I'll be honest with y'all, considering that there is really only one way to deal with this situation down here, I'll explain what the battle plan most likely will look like for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are going to use Krynky and Kazachi Lahri as a jumping point to move into the forests around the Aleski Sands and towards the area of the E-97 at Rudinsk, cutting off the Russian garrison inside of Aleski, which could be bombarded by artillery and forced towards the area of Kardashinka. And once that's done, the Ukrainian Marine brigades that have shifted over from Krynky and Kazachi Lahri and have created a substantial bridgehead from there to Rudinsk Verdansk will then be able to take Helplessly and help the Ukrainian bridge laying units that have been trained for literal months at this point in high volume to be able to set up either barges or an entire Bailey bridge across the area of the Antonovsky Bridge, allowing for heavier armor such as tanks and armored personnel carriers to cross in the area of Dachi and move into Helplessly. Once securing the armored vehicles, the Ukrainian forces will most likely be able to conduct a concerted offensive down the E97 highway and surrounding roads towards the area of Skidovsk and also towards the Armyansk Gap on the northwestern side of Crimea. With all of this in mind, the Ukrainians may be able to take the Russians off guard if all of this was done very quickly, much like a trapdoor maneuver that General Schwarzkopf did in the Gulf War, at least on a smaller scale. If that was done successfully, and the Ukrainians are actually able to make it to Armyansk, and then push through Armyansk and at least into the area of Alenko or Pravda, the Ukrainians are going to be in a very advantageous position to conduct a wide-open, highly maneuverable battle over the entire peninsula of Crimea. All of this, though, is going to be quite difficult, because the Ukrainians first have to deal with using pretty much an only infantry-based force here in the area of the Dnipro River. They pretty much have to take just infantrymen, lightly equipped with either a few man-pads and a couple of ATGMs or ATGM launchers like the Javelin, and then try and push against a VDV division that is fully equipped, not like a normal light VDV division, but it has tank support as well. They have to push against that to get out of Krynky and start moving towards Verdansk. And that is a large area of ground to cover for a light infantry force, and also without any real air support or artillery support in heavy amounts, that is going to prove to be a very difficult challenge, even if that VDV division is brand new, green, and has practically no experience. Hopefully, the F-16s that are going to be introduced in Ukrainian service here within this month or the next month will be able to help with defeating Russian SAM sites in this area, so that way the Ukrainians can achieve relative air superiority, at least in this area of the front line, allowing them to bombard this Russian VDV division from the air, hopefully taking no casualties, and once they're able to secure that, they will then be able to push through Krynky and towards Verdansk and cut off the Russian garrison in Helplessly, thus forcing them further towards Kardashinka and a viable supply route near Olaprostan. But I hope that does address everything about this area, because we're currently seeing a lull, so it's best to take this moment that is a lull and just explain what's going on in the area and what will be happening next. But in our only clip from here today, we got to see that the Ukrainians destroyed a Russian Strela 10. This was done by the 73rd Naval Center of Special Operations. There we can see the Strela 10. And you can see a picture of it here. You can actually see the launcher right there where the mouse cursor is circling, and you can see the front of the MTLB, which is the base of a Strela 10, right there where the mouse cursor is circling. When you see the drones looking at it head on, it appears that the Strela operator does not see the drone, and the drone is using this time to call in the artillery strike that's about to wipe this thing off the map. And there we go, dead on hit.
Oh.
Eagle!
Damn, Igor. Like, what happened to you, Igor? Like, I think you got a little banged up.
Igor, go home. Oh, look at that. That thing is toasting.
Toasting like a Subway sandwich. You want that toasted? The Ukrainian said, hell yeah, put it in there twice.
Man, the whole back of that thing is gone. Got its back blown out. I'll tell you that. Rest in peace.
Damn. They had to do him like that. They could have done him worse.
Had to do him dirty in front of their squad. But moving on from the news down to the Dnipro area, I will say before we move on, just to kind of round out everything, including the video, this is the area where we will probably see the most potential for Ukrainian advances in the future. It seems as though after the summer offensive, it's become fairly clear that the Russian defenses in this area, it's possible to surpass them or overcome them, but it's going to take a lot of resources, manpower, and time, and that's something that the Ukrainians can't really put in. That is a defender's dream to have all of those things go in their favor, and at the moment, the Russians currently have the advantage, at least in this area, and it doesn't appear that the Ukrainians will be able to conduct a major breakthrough from this direction. However, this area near the Dnipro River is certainly a soft underbelly of the entire Russian front lines, and will pose a great deal of potential for future advances by Ukrainian forces if they are able to conduct their battle plan accordingly and bring over heavy equipment and arms to support the Ukrainian infantry and their push towards the Crimean Peninsula. But moving on from that little bit of news and on towards Kharkiv, I also have to make sure to cover this one-off piece of news because this is a pretty big one. Many people have been talking about the North Koreans. North Korea this, North Korea that. And you know what? I'm not going to make this a habit. I just kind of feel like it tonight. But I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about North Korea. North Korea is a country that is practically always on the verge of bankruptcy and also on the very cusp or in the middle of having a famine. The interesting fact about North Korea and South Korea is that North and South Korea were actually the complete opposite up until about the late 1980s. North Korea was economically, and really in every way, rather than economically, more successful than South Korea up until about 1987 and 1989. North Korea was doing really good for itself, but there was a small problem. Kim Jong-il, who was the current dictator at the time, decided that there needed to be more meat available in the North Korean diet. And the best way to achieve this, the North Korean government decided, was from goats. They would just breed a massive amount of goats, allow them to graze on the grasslands of the mountains inside of North Korea, which are incredibly plentiful and much abound. Pretty much no land in North Korea is arable. Most of it's just mountainsides with grass growing on it, which is not suitable for crops, but is suitable for goats to eat. The goats started to eat it, and the goat population skyrocketed in North Korea over the next few years during the 1980s. The problem was, however, is that the North Koreans never decided to cap the population of the goats. They just allowed the population of the goats to run wild. And so the goats literally started to eat everything. And the goats ended up eating enough of the grass that was holding the topsoil, or really any of the soil, on the side of these mountains in North Korea so thoroughly, there was nothing holding the soil together. And so when the monsoon season came around in 1991, it ended up washing all of the very little of North Korea's fertile topsoil that was in the country into the sea. And then there came the problem. The topsoil ended up destroying a lot of the farm fields that were producing the limited amount of actual crops that the North Koreans could make. The goats then ended up dying off because there was nothing for them to eat. And then, after all of that, the North Koreans found out that they only had about 6 to 7 months of food stores left before a famine would set in. And by that point, the Soviet Union was in the middle of its collapse, so the Soviet Union was not going to be bankrolling pretty much the entire stomach of North Korea. And so that began the first Great Famine of North Korea, where something around 3 to 5 million North Koreans were estimated to have died over the next few years. After that,
You know, it's funny. It's funny they call it a great famine. It seems like they would probably call it a bad famine because I don't know a famine that's great. You know,
well, this one was great from the number of people it killed, but I get what
they
you're
say
saying.
that's the great famine. Kim Jong Un said we're going to spend this a different way this time. This ain't a bad famine. We're going to call this the great one. Starve and be happy.
Man, and the Koreans were happy. But to get through the rest of the story, because this is actually something that still affects North Korea to this day, Matthew. This is the craziest part about it. The North Koreans never recovered from what the goats did to the Korean countryside. North Korea still suffers to this day with not being able to produce any crops because there's hardly any usable topsoil left inside of all of North Korea. Sure, the grass did grow back, and you can see that on satellite footage, but the soil below it is so nutrient depleted, there is no way to support any major agriculture inside of North Korea to this day. And that's why we heard that during the plague a few years ago, when the North Koreans completely shut themselves off from the outside world, not only did the plague manage to get in, and then it ended up killing tens of thousands of people because there was no medical treatment or assistance whatsoever inside Korea, they also cut themselves off from the only source of food they had, which was the People's Republic of China, which ended up causing another famine, and we've estimated that another 1 million North Koreans may have died in that famine, although there's really no way to corroborate or back up that number. That's more so just a Western estimate. But the North Koreans are in pretty bad shape, and they're desperate to always try and find a way to make some kind of money. This is why the North Koreans are kind of known as a criminal underworld nation, because they usually end up doing very shady things to try and make cash. And they make very little of it, but they are desperate for money because they have to get this money, and then they have to buy Chinese food with that money. Otherwise, their manpower pool is going to be shrinking constantly because the country is pretty much in a permanent state of famine. This means that when the Russians got in the war in Ukraine a while ago, the North Koreans were more than happy to begin negotiations to talk about sending them some kind of arms and equipment that they produce. And that's a big thing that the North Koreans make to try and earn themselves some money to buy food with later on down the road. And we finally got proof today that not only are North Korean artillery shells being used, but North Korean ballistic missiles have ended up being used by the Russians. The first confirmed North Korean ballistic missile to ever be shot down or uncovered being used by the Russians during an attack was on the 2nd of January this year, right outside of Kharkiv. We can see the remnants of this missile here. They were able to confirm that its components are all North Korean. This ballistic missile was produced 100% inside of North Korea, and not only that, we were able to get a confirmation as well about that today from the United States Department of Defense, and I'll be making sure to send you all over here to this. And let me see if I can get it. This was from C-SPAN. This is from John Kirby here in the U.S. government, and I'll be letting you all hear some of his statements he made today, which is full-on 100% corroboration, not only with the picture and video evidence, and the fact that the North Koreans have openly been providing arms to the Russians. This ties the entire story together officially, and does confirm that the North Koreans did provide the Russians with ballistic missiles that they are now using against Ukraine.
Over the course of 5 days around the New Year's holiday, Russia launched repeated waves of aerial attacks against Ukraine. These massive bombardments used drones and missiles to strike cities and civilian infrastructure all across the country. Strikes reportedly hit a maternity hospital, a shopping mall, residential areas, killing dozens of innocent people and injuring hundreds more. As Russia continues to launch these brutal attacks, the United States has new information to share about the support that Russia is receiving from third countries. Due in part to our sanctions and export controls, Russia has become increasingly isolated on the world stage, and they've been forced to look to like-minded states for military equipment. As we've been warning publicly, one of those states is North Korea. Our information indicates that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea recently provided Russia with ballistic missile launchers and several ballistic missiles. On the 30th of December, 2023, Russian forces launched at least one of these North Korean ballistic missiles into Ukraine.
We're going to be ending the clip right there because the rest of it is really just adding on to extra detail. The first minute is the one that counts, because that was an official statement today from John Kirby in the United States, an official of the U.S. government, confirming that our sources also indicate that the missiles were provided by North Korea. And not only that, a statement was also made that there may be some ballistic missile launcher vehicles that were also provided by the North Koreans as well. All of this is indicating that we need to find a way at the moment to try and sanction the North Koreans. At least is more than we have. It's going to be very hard for us to do that because we've practically sanctioned them into oblivion already. We may as well have every sanction you can possibly pull out on the North Koreans already used, but we need to find out a way to get at the North Koreans a little bit more. Possibly the only way we may be able to get to the North Koreans is through the People's Republic of China, also known as just China or Communist China, whatever you want to call it. We may have to start directing some diplomatic pressure at the Chinese, so that way they may start to limit the amount of food that the North Koreans are able to receive, or something else along those lines. I don't really know how we're going to be able to go about tackling that issue with the Chinese. The Chinese are a very large economy, the second largest one in the world. Not only that, the United States and the People's Republic of China are major trade partners, and therefore putting any diplomatic pressure on them could probably easily be rebuffed by them, unless we were trying to get into a full-blown trade war and end up having some logistical issues a little bit down the line, because we haven't been able to move a lot of our major manufacturing from the Chinese to other countries. Although, I will have you all know, there is a little bit of a silver lining. At the moment, there's currently a major exodus of a lot of U.S. companies that have been producing their equipment inside of China. They're now moving to Vietnam and Mexico, and specifically Mexico in incredibly large numbers, because it's now cheaper to hire workers and also build factories inside of Mexico than it is in China, because China is finally starting to make that transition from an industrial economy to a service economy, much like the United States is now. And with that, the manufacturing hubs are going to move to other nations, most likely Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, or Mexico, which Mexico is kind of the target that the United States wants most of the manufacturing to move to, because it's on our continent, it's going to be a lot easier to control, and on top of that, Mexican-American relations are not that bad compared to what they could be with other countries inside of Southeast Asia. But going off of all this, it is certainly starting to show that there needs to be more sanctions made against the North Koreans. And the North Koreans, much like the Iranians, are becoming full-fledged providers of arms and equipment to the Russians in this war. Moving on from that news and on into our location unknowns, we have a lot to talk about. I mean, we have loads to talk about, and I see a lot of y'all are still in the live chat talking about the North Koreans and what we should be doing against them. Some people are saying that we should sanction the high-tech side of things. Some people are saying that we should be, hell, going to war with the North Koreans. A lot of y'all have many different ideas on what the United States' official response should be to the North Korean situation and their provision of arms to the Russians. A lot of y'all have had huge input on this, and actually, Matthew has been asking y'all what y'all think about this very topic. And Matthew, what have people been saying about this?
All right, so jumping into our first and only poll for the moment, the question is, Ukraine says Russia is attacking using North Korea-supplied ballistic missiles, and what are your thoughts on this? 43% said North Korea is becoming problematic for Ukraine, 41% says just China using North Korea as a proxy, 12% said unsure, and 5% said, that sounds a little bit unlikely. And on this one, I gotta say, it's always a close call with North Korea because my natural tendency is to say that China is the one actually behind the scenes because, as we know, North Korea is broke. They can't feed their people and they can barely support their own infrastructure. It's all a big facade, and to think that they're able to make a ton of ballistic missiles, so many in fact to send to Russia for them to fight their own war over there with Ukraine, that strikes me as a little bit suspicious. So I'm going to lean toward the side that China is using North Korea as a proxy, and North Korea is probably not doing this on their own because they simply can't stand on their own 2 feet. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that the North Koreans may be able to actually produce their own ballistic missiles because we've started to see that some Russian-produced ballistic missiles here at the later part of this year have a large amount of American and Taiwanese components inside of them and pretty much are not able to operate unless if they have those components because we're not seeing any indigenously made Russian components in the missiles at this point. So going off of that, I think this may be how the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese may all be trying to circumvent the sanctions that we've imposed on both the Russians and the North Koreans in this regard. I think they're setting up shell companies in third-party countries like, say, let's just pick 2 that we would know, China and Vietnam. And these companies are going, we would like to buy U.S. components for, our purposes, maybe not even militaristic purposes, it's just for reasons. The Taiwanese companies and the American companies ship this equipment to these third-party shell companies. The third-party shell companies then end up shipping this through China and then into North Korea or into Russia, allowing the Russians and the North Koreans to be able to produce these kinds of missiles at whatever quantity they need. So going off of that, because that's something that's starting to become a lot more clear, especially with the Russian situation, I feel like that easily could be transferred over to apply to North Korea as well. We're getting a very clear idea that this is becoming incredibly problematic for Ukraine, and there's really no good way to go about this without completely crippling Western technological industries, because right now we don't know what shell companies are out there that are buying these electronic components and then shipping them into Russia and North Korea for them to build missiles with. We have no idea. So if we wanted to stop something like this, we're going to have to impose sanctions on really any electronic components being shipped out of their own home country. So the Taiwanese would not be able to sell TSMC components anywhere around the world. The U.S. wouldn't be able to sell ours anywhere around the world. They would be produced in America and sold in America, and that's it. That could end up destroying the technological industries heavily. So there's really no way.
You would really think, though, considering how dangerous these components can be if they get into the wrong hands. And obviously, they're like computer chips and they seem mundane, but considering lives that could potentially be at stake if they're used in weapons, it seems like maybe they'd put the time into vetting their customers a little bit more closely, because if somebody places that big of an order, surely they got to know who these people are and not just, sending it to some random people. They're not really sure who these people are.
Well, you would think that. But Matthew, you know very well, because you're a big fan of the SR-71, that we were able to pull the wool over the Soviet Union's eyes way back in the early 1970s by setting up shell companies and then buying exorbitant amounts of titanium to then go build the SR-71s with.
That's true, but the Soviets were dumb, and hopefully we're smarter than the Soviets, and that we wouldn't make the same mistake. We were able to pull the wool over their eyes, but hopefully they couldn't do the same to us. That's wishful thinking to an extent, but, you'd think that we would be a little bit more on top of that.
Oh, I think we are on top of it. At least the U.S. government is, as much as they can be. But it's more so about the private companies. Because unlike the Soviet Union, where you had to get central government authorization to sell that titanium to a shell party, which made it stupidity on the Russian government's end, this is probably a bunch of private companies that are just filling out order requests that they're getting and sending this stuff to wherever the shell company is, and then they get sent to Russia or North Korea. So sadly, I don't really think there's a way for us to curb this unless we were to start having, CIA or FBI agents in every single company that produced electronic components and telling them where they could and couldn't sell their technology or equipment to. That was going to start becoming a pretty tough thing for us to do, but I think we need to find some way to either figure out what shell companies are actually shipping this stuff to Korea and Russia for them to be able to produce this, because this is, I would agree with y'all, the majority of y'all, starting to become a serious issue for Ukraine, especially if there is really no limit to the kind of electronic components that they can get, and they're able to just manufacture these things until the cows come home. That could start to be a very serious issue strategically for the Ukrainians, because that means that Russian ballistic and cruise missile stocks will never run out. They'll just be able to produce however much they need and keep it going. But with
I think Ron Morris hit it on the head. The reason why the manufacturers probably aren't checking really who's buying the stuff is they really just want the money. And they're thinking, yeah, this might end up in wrong hands, but the odds of it happening are probably smaller than not. So let's just send it and get the money. And that's honestly probably the way it's working. That's unfortunate though, but that's just the way the world works. People like the money, and money talks.
We'll see. We'll see. That's an interesting point.
I mean, why else would they do it?
Well, I mean, they could just be a normal running company. I don't think they're, I don't think these companies actually know that they're sending stuff that's going to be used in a war. I'm sure that whatever companies are, buying the stuff, I'm sure they're saying something like, oh, we're a third party purchaser for aircraft components, for autopilot systems and stuff like that. And then that company goes, oh, that makes sense. Well, here you go. Here's 300 of them. And then the whatever shell company this is goes, okay, here's 150 to the North Koreans, here's 150 to the Russians, pay up, and then they get paid. So I'm sure that the original companies that are selling these electronic components have probably absolutely no idea what their tech is actually being used for in the end, because the shell company obviously isn't telling them, yeah, we're ending up providing these to the Koreans and the Russians to produce weapons with, because imagine if that was publicly said, or they had a really good indication of that and it was almost clear to that company, and then they ended up selling it to them. Obviously, the U.S. government is going to have some very serious issues when they find out, so I would say it probably is being done by the ignorance of the companies more so than them knowing where that's going. But who knows? Maybe it's a mix. Maybe it's different from company to company. But with that, I hope that does address it well. I want to hold out hope though, because honestly, Matthew's idea is probably a lot more realistic than mine. But I want to hold out hope that U.S. and Taiwanese companies wouldn't sit there and shoot the Western world in the foot by trying to sell their technology to shell companies that clearly are sketch or ambiguous with what they're really doing with the stuff. So hopefully that's the case instead of what Matthew's saying, because if that's the real issue, we've got a bigger problem on our hands than we'd even know about. But with that,
I don't want to beat the poor old horse into the ground, but I have to say, and not trying to be negative here, it's just reality. I think the manufacturers selling these components and things like that, no particular company I'm speaking about, just in general, I'm pretty sure they know who their buyers, the buyers of the stuff are, because if somebody places a big enough order, like to use in weapons, obviously they're going to know what company they're dealing with behind the scenes, and they're going to know who's connected with that company, who the people are they're speaking with and dealing with, and they probably get an indication here and there that this person, is not from the typical area we deal in, or the person doesn't look like somebody we've dealt with before. And they're buying such a large quantity. It's kind of like when you hear about all these used trucks, the special type that goes to the Middle East, just suddenly ending up there, the Hilux model, that particular one. If you see an order come in for Hiluxes in mass quantity and it's going to the Middle East, well, you might have a little bit of a concern in your mind. But, people tend to turn a blind eye to those things.
Maybe so. I mean, you've got a really good point right there. And I think if that is, if it's as good a point as it is, and it certainly is a great point, I think that the U.S. should start to divert the CIA into looking into what companies here in the U.S. may be selling this tech to these shell companies and try and figure out where the shell companies are. Not that we can bust up the shell companies in a foreign country. There probably isn't a lot we can do to stop that. But we can find out how these components are making it into North Korea and Russia and try and end up doing some persuasion on the companies that are selling this equipment and tech, especially if they clearly know about it and yet they're still selling it. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And with that, we are fresh out of polls for the moment, so we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $100 donation from guess who?
Majora.
And thank you very much, Majora, for that very generous support. And they said LSA and strong. And can't get on much at the moment, but I support to the max that I can keep it up. And question from the live chat, please.
And thank you so much for the massive support, Majora. The biggest support of the night so far. And I gotta thank you so much for that once again. And also, I hate that you can't get on. We're glad that you're here tonight because you are a legend, Majora. You've been around here forever. And I gotta thank you for being here, making the pilgrimage tonight. And not only that, being a part of the Lee Spring Army. Lee Spring Army is strong and continues to roll, and thanks to your support, we'll be able to make sure to keep the pizza fund going in the background. And also, we will make sure to get a question from the live chat, and I also got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel, because folks like you who do support us help it to be possible for us to end up trying to help Ukraine by covering the news of what's going on over there and everything like that. It means a lot to us that folks like you are always helping to support this channel, and we thank everyone who does, including you as well, Majora. And thank you once again for that massive support. And what do we got from the live chat?
In the live chat question is going to go to Daniel Russell, who says, Enforcer, I've noticed a lot of Ukrainian men in the United States, and I thought men had to stay and fight. And have you heard anything like that?
Yes, I have, and you're correct. Ukrainian men are supposed to stay and fight. There was a story going around, and people don't even like me bringing this up because, some people have favorites of Ukrainian men who left the country, and that's a whole thing. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about it on a general level. I'm not here to make exceptions. There was no such thing as a medical exception for able-bodied conscription-age men to leave Ukraine. That was never a thing. A lot of the Ukrainian men that you see that left the country by bribing border guards, from what we're understanding now. That's not something I'm saying. That's something that the Ukrainian SBU is saying. And that adds a lot of validity to it because I'm not talking about just one or two. I'm talking about dozens, if not at this point, hundreds of border guards have been caught and arrested because they're accepting bribes from Ukrainian men that are trying to cross the border. They're taking tens of thousands of dollars for families to cross. It's a massive money-making opportunity for these Ukrainian border guards, and they have no reason at all to turn anyone down if they can pay. Now, as far as it goes, we can't judge them all because maybe some of them did make it out and they actually did get clearance from the Ukrainian government to do so. But the large majority of them probably did not. A lot of them are probably trying to dodge service inside of Ukraine, and some people are going to say that's their prerogative, and all of that. But it's not necessarily the case. Like, for example, Bobby Karalfa said, no, they could leave before they had to stay. And that's not necessarily true either, because once martial law was declared inside of Ukraine, there was no way for able-bodied men to legally leave, and that happened on the third day of the war. And I'm starting to have a lot of doubts that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men were somehow able to cross the border in 72 hours, because we didn't see a lot of Ukrainian able-bodied men outside of Ukraine in those first 72 hours or leaving at that time. A lot of these men started to show up in the Western world months later. In some instances 3 to 4 months after martial law had been declared, and these able-bodied men were not able to leave. So going off of that and trying to answer that question there, I would say that a lot of them are probably out of Ukraine because of, bribes. I can't say that for all of them, but that's what we understand now. And the Ukrainian government has made it very clear that none of those men were supposed to leave, because just about 2.5 weeks ago, the Ukrainians are now requesting that nations in the European Union that have a large amount of Ukrainian male citizens in them should begin to return them, because they're not even supposed to be outside of Ukraine at all. And that was a statement that was clearly made by President Zelenskyy himself. And I would go with his statement that no one was supposed to have left, well, no able-bodied men were supposed to have left the country permanently while the war was going on, over some random people out there who said they got like some kind of a medical waiver or something, because who seems to have a lot more credibility? President Zelenskyy, the guy who made the decree that no able-bodied men should be leaving the country, or some Ukrainian guy who has an interest in making sure that he doesn't go back for his own reasons. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, because that's what we understand right now. And I'm trying to read the chat. Let's see. Let's see here. And a lot of people are saying, any man worth of salt should stay. We can understand if they leave. But the thing is, to me, it's not about whether they have a right to leave or whether they should stay or whether they're a coward or a hero. It's really about what the Ukrainian government's laws were. And I do have to be quite honest. There is still a bit of corruption inside of Ukraine. Of course, they're not as corrupt as the Russians. The Russians just take the cake every day. But there is a decent amount of lower level corruption inside of Ukraine. And this is something that we've had corroborated by BC Skyman, who has been to Ukraine, and he has been able to attest, not only because he has been to Ukraine, but he has family in Ukraine, that low level of corruption on the level of like a border guard is actually something of a common thing, and is a holdover from the Soviet era tradition and customs, where you couldn't really get anything done at all unless it was through corruption, because the Soviet bureaucracy was so insane and stupid that there was really no way to get anything done unless you just bribe someone and then they got it done for you. So, going off of all of this, it's not entirely out of the question at all, with everything put together, that a lot of these men did just leave the country. They broke the law, is really what they did. Because, let me try and think about how to put this a good way. The few guys who left the United States in the Vietnam War, whether you agree with them dodging the draft or not, they broke the law, especially if they had gotten their draft notice and were told to report to a service station or something similar. They broke the law. And the law is the law. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, the nation must ensure that its laws are followed. And when martial law is declared and a whole bunch of people just pack up and run, you are asking for serious trouble, asking for really bad trouble, because you're encouraging other people to leave because there's no consequences. And after all that, the nation will fall. So, some pretty serious stuff. But I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much for sponsoring that massive live chat, Majora. And also thank you for throwing in the massive amount of support as well. And with that, we are on to the second question.
All right, and the second super chat of the night goes to Sinful J, who throws in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Sinful, for the second very large super chat 2 nights in a row. We appreciate it very much. And he says, congrats on the top 10. And thank you, Sinful. We're still very proud of the Key Post top 10 YouTube channels of the Ukraine war. I'm telling you. He says, also, I'm looking to upgrade my Diamondback DB15. And any recommendations on a good red dot site?
EOTech. EOTech.
Hell yeah, man. If you got the money, go for it.
EOTech is a really solid red dot, or more so, I think it's a reflex site, technically. But nevertheless, really good one. But they're kind of expensive. They're like in the 500s range. Hollow Sun is also a really good one as well. It's a little cheaper, but it's pretty quality. I actually haven't seen one break. I had a Hollow Sun for a little bit. I liked it enough. It's just that it doesn't have the EOTech name on it. And also some people complain that if you fling it on the ground at like 60 miles an hour, it's going to break, which it will. But, for most people's purposes, you're not flinging a gun at 60 miles an hour top down onto the ground, onto its site. So I would say that's probably the best red dot I would get. And also, really cool that you have a diamond back. And let me make sure to pull this up. DB15. Let me take a look at this thing. Oh, nice. Let me go get a picture of this thing. So this is the rifle in question, at least what I think is the rifle in question right here. Really freaking cool, I gotta say. But
that is nice. I like the little, like, what do they call that? The dust cover on it. It's pretty cool. It's got like the 5.56 written on it.
that's pretty neat. I gotta say, mad respect. I'm really liking the rifle you got right here. But I hope that is a good recommendation. To be honest though, if like budget is of no consequence, I cannot recommend enough the ACOG, a 4x magnification scope. Very good at medium ranges. That's what I use to shoot out at 600 yards with a like 16.5-inch barrel M4. So it is a very good scope, top of the line. But if you're wanting just a red dot, probably an EOTech would be a very good bet to go with. But with that, I hope that does a EOTech or a Hollow Sun. EOTech if you're just looking for the best red dot. Hollow Sun if you're looking for a really good red dot, but on more of a budget, because the Hollow Suns are in like the $300 to $350 range. But with that, I hope that does address that well, Sinful J. And also, thank you for congratulating us on the top 10. It means a lot to us. And not only that, folks like you who support this channel and help us to keep this thing rolling made it possible for us to be able to be on that top 10 list. Because y'all have helped us to be on air so long that someone finally recognized the channel for something, which meant a lot to us. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and the last one of this segment.
All right, and this one goes to Marion Deemer, also a longtime channel legend. I'm telling you, a big-time legend who throws in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And she says, Slav Ukraine, and Herom Slava.
And Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Marion. You have been here forever. And I gotta thank you for supporting the channel tonight and helping us keep this thing running, because folks like you make it possible for us to be on air, so that way everyone can say Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this thing to keep on running. And somebody just said, hang on, before we even move out of this question, someone said, Enforcer, you're not shooting at 600. Chill down a bit, please. Head beginning to grow. What an idiot. Listen, man, I'm going to have to call you an idiot because I literally qualified at 600 yards and had a range officer there to confirm it. It was a sub-MOA grouping at 600 yards with an M4. If you can't handle that, live with it. Don't ban the guy. I want him to be here to get a response on that one, but that is just stupid. I can't help that you suck at shooting, where you can't hit 600 yards, but some people can. So you got to start learning to live with it, or get with the program, because that is.
I think a nerve was hit. A nerve was definitely hit.
Yeah,
here.
I'll tell you something. I don't have a nerve getting hit over many things, but when I do something that is literally confirmed, you get a range card from the CMP where they have to actually stamp it to prove that you were qualified at that range to shoot. That is just so stupid to say I didn't qualify at 600, considering the target is literally at 600 yards at that range, and it's the range that you go to qualify. Like, that is just dumb. That is just the dumbest thing.
You even had to deal with that cantankerous old geezer, too, to try to get the card stamp for the 600 yards. So you went through the ringer to get that.
Yeah, I went through the ringer to get that damn thing. That is just ridiculous. I mean, your head's starting to grow. Maybe figure out a breathing technique or something to actually hit a shot at 600 yards, and enough of them to actually get a grouping to qualify. But anyways, moving on from that, sorry everyone that I got rude there. We usually try and not get rude, but that was just absolutely ridiculous. Wait a minute, hang on. Let's see here. No, keep the clown here. I want the clown here. But
let him back in.
Yeah, let him back in. I want that clown here.
Let that sink in.
Video proof. No, I got the card with the stamp on it to prove it. Yeah, clown. Yeah, clown. You come straight from the Ringling Brothers Circus. Apparently when they shut down, you're out of the job, so you decided to come here and start an act on this channel. Sadly, I don't think it's going to work well, but do your best. But anyways, moving on to this question segment, and thank you so much once again for support, Marion Deemer, and helping the channel to keep on running. We're now moving on into the area of Verkhnya Divanka, where we got to see that a Buk-1 surface-to-air missile system was destroyed by the 14th Separate Brigade. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see the drone finding the Buk system. We see them targeting the sand battery.
The LSA is speaking. They said, ban the ass. Keep the man. Let the clown remain. Man, everyone is speaking. They're giving their votes.
Man, and I saw someone say, why don't you show video proof? I would have, but Matthew, you remember, I sat there and took all the pictures of the grouping because you remember it on the group chat we're in. I sent the pictures over Instagram. I didn't take them on my camera roll. So you know what? I'm going to just go back out there again do it again, and then I'll get the pictures to show y'all. Or better yet, we'll make a video on it, and I'll be like, look, M4 600 yards, so that way we can get the clown. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see that near Volodymyrivka, the 41st Brigade was in action. We see their tank firing. And we now see those shells coming on down a ways away. Slaw. And so with it, that's the end of the clip. Absolutely wonderful to see and great to know that a T-64BV was able to pop off a couple of shots. Beyond that, the area was largely inactive though, which brings us down to Bakhmut, which was also a fairly quiet part of the front lines today. We only got to see some Russian tanks getting hit by a Stugna almost outside of the battlefield near the periphery, and here's the clip. Chad music ensues. And we see the Stugna on its way. We see the armored vehicles on the move out there. We can see a second missile fire. We're not sure if the first one missed or not, but we can now see the armored vehicle getting hit. Boom. Bada boom, baby. And we see the Russians running away. Oh, I know what's playing. Yep, that's okay. I had to make sure. But that's the end of the clip. And wonderful to see the Stugna in action. A very rare sighting these days. Very rare. But nevertheless, moving on out of the Bakhmut area and down into the direction of Avdiivka, we did get to see a decent amount of footage in this area. But once again, no frontline advances whatsoever. Nothing has changed. And moving on into the area of the northern flank, where we got to see why nothing changed, our first clip shows an M2A2 Bradley firing onto the Russians. And I gotta tell you, Matthew, while I've been covering this news, I've been watching, you know, everything going on in the live chat, and it's crazy how mad this guy is getting over not believing that you can shoot 600 yards. Like, don't you know that that's, like, just, like, normal? Like, you know... Also, Bee's Nest, I did not shoot that with iron sights. I think it would be I truly think it would be impossible with iron sights. I did it with an ACOG, 4 times magnification on a FN M4A1 with a 16.5-inch barrel, and that's what I was shooting with. And I was just using normal Winchester target ammo. It was not any match grade ammo or anything like that. And I ended up shooting from what they said, because I think you had to do a sub-MOA grouping to get stamped and qualify, it was a sub-MOA grouping of like 3 shots consecutively, you know, in the same part of the target. So, ended up doing that, and then I ended up getting the stamp. I would show the card, but I looked at the card just a moment ago, and the card has my full name on it, and also some other identifying information as well. So I'm not showing the card. I'll just go out there and do it again, and, clown on the boy. Dude, now the guy's trying to backtrack after he sat there and said, bro, don't be so arrogant. And then I'm like, what the hell do you mean arrogant? Like, I actually did it. And now he's going, oh, hey, I'm not oh, what a clown. I'm enjoying it, though. I'm enjoying it. I hope y'all are all enjoying the live chat. But with that, we can see right there the Ukrainians smacking around the Russians just a little bit. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see an abandoned T-72B3 get destroyed. I mean, you see it's sitting right by the railroad tracks outside the coke plant, and it looks like this thing's about to get coked up.
Is that a bobcat they got for this symbol for this group?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Man, I'm telling you, that's a bobcat and a half right there.
Man,
that thing's got some teeth on it.
I'm telling you what, it really does have teeth on it. And speaking of which, we have to cover the location unknowns. So starting off with our first clip, we got to see a Chulpan destroyed by the Shadow unit. Oh, there it is, the Chulpan, right there. Oh, and there it
Oh.
goes. A little nuclear explosion there on our tulpan. Ooh. Oh no, and there goes the ammo.
Ah.
I don't know what that is.
Whoa.
Okay. Whoa, Romania. Oh, a couple of sleeping Russians. Okay, it's
What are
not
these people
Romania. It's
doing?
just a woman dancing, and they cut off everything below the neck, so it looked pretty bad. But whoa, Romania. But anyways, that's the end of that clip. Wonderful to see a tulpan destroyed. Moving on into our next clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian make a bullpup out of his machine gun. I've never seen anything like this before, but that's brand new right over here. The bullpup the PKT. I've never seen that before. That's new, and hopefully it'll catch on because it kind of looks pretty neat. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Russians make a modification to their BTR where they literally get put in the gulag when they drive it around. I don't like the idea of that. That seems like a death trap. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see all of the air targets destroyed in 2023 made into an infographic. 887 cruise missiles, 15 Kinzels, 41 other ballistic missiles, almost 1,300 Shahed 136s and 131s, 35 Lancets, 131 Orlons, and other drones. Those were all the air targets that were shot down. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into the Russian casualty report, just to make sure that we cover everything in the location unknowns. Ooh!
Oh my god! 6
Oh
Bobcats.
my Lord! 6 Bobcats destroyed. And I gotta say, it is something. I gotta tell y'all. Beautiful. I gotta say, absolutely incredible. 780 Russian soldiers were also knocked out as well. And along with 21 armored personnel carriers, 26 supply trucks, 12 main battle tanks, 28 artillery pieces, 5 drones, 2 MLRSs, 2 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and overall, it was a pretty damn good day. I gotta say, a very good day at that. And it's beautiful to know that the Ukrainians were able to once again inflict this many losses onto the Russian forces. But with that, we're now moving on from that little casualty report right there and on into the Avdiivka news again, because I had to make sure we cover the location unknowns really quickly because we completely skipped over that earlier. But moving on into the area of Kamyanka, we got to see a failed Russian assault. The 30th Brigade helped with making sure that it failed.
Boom. Jaga jaga. The owl, he come along and squall, dropped a bomb on this thing right here. He's got these guys crawling. I'm telling you, they're trying to smell nature, the dirt. Look at him go.
And look at them go. They're getting blasted. Absolutely. Oh, looks like a little platoon spread now.
Also, I told our bot friend, since he's still here and he's still yapping, I told him I'll take a hot dog with extra mustard, please. Come on, I said please.
Ooh.
Oh, man. And the Ukrainians gave them a hot dog and a half. Oh, look at them go. Put a relish in that one. Look at this.
Ooh, that thing is smoking.
The one guy's got a little bit of sense. He's going to floor it and get out of there quick. Oh. Little tracer running across the screen. It's getting a little shook.
Uh-huh. Oh, this went into a little bit of an abysmal failure. And then we can see the cluster bomb coming down on top of them just to round things out. And now the Russians, without any armored vehicles, are trying to withdraw from the front line. And now you see a massive essay that was written at the very end. And that's the end of the clip. But really nice to see that the 30th Brigade was able to ensure that a Russian assault would fail. And with that, we're now moving on into the area of southern Avdiivka, where we got to see that the Ukrainians hit a very rare frontline ammunition stowage and ended up causing a pretty big detonation right there. Sadly, the first part, the actual explosion, wasn't caught. It was just a subsequent mushroom cloud from the explosion.
That's an extremely slow-looking mushroom cloud. It's barely moving.
Man, that thing's just lingering. Not even B-Wax said, "Hey, Forster, is that guy asking for plums or figs?" Oh, hello there. Oh, hello there. Can I have a plum? Oh, man, it's slow, baby. Slow! And it's beautiful to see. Absolutely incredible. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of that ammunition stowage blowing up, and a little bit further down out of the Avdiivka battlefield and on towards Marinka, where we got to see some Russians that were slightly lost. They're lost. They're really about to be lost here in a minute. Ooh. And that's the end of the clip right there. Very nice to see. And also, I see a lot of people, just really quickly to key y'all in, because some of y'all are like, oh, where'd the little asshole go? Well, he's still here. It's just that he's currently revving up the crack-riddled mine at like 100 and something miles an hour to try and come up with the next roast, which is going to be a very lame one. But I assure y'all, there will be another one, because y'all are waiting for him to pop up again. He's still, yep, there we go. It's the same one. He's not even coming up with anything new. You gotta come up with new material, man. You gotta have something new. But I just want y'all to see this, because we know where this guy's from. We all know where he's from. But it's always interesting just to see him in action, and we rarely ever let them spread their wings and do their thing. But tonight I decided we'll allow one clown to put on a show, and I hope y'all enjoy it. Maybe you'll even bring back the Ringling Brothers Circus. Who knows? But moving on from Marinka and all the way through the southern front, because we didn't really have a lot going on down here today. It seemed to be somewhat inactive, but near the area of Robotny, there was still, of course, a small bit of action. And moving on into our first bit, we got to see that the Ukrainians were dropping some bombs onto the Russians. And we can see them smacking them down right into the Russian position with some great precision. Man, whenever the bots come in, the orders for hot dogs go through the roof.
I'm telling you, man, I was sitting there thinking to myself silently, if the hot dog doesn't get here in less than 5 minutes, he's getting a 1-star Yelp.
I would agree. I would agree. I would back that up completely. But with that, we're now moving on from this little clip showing the Ukrainians dropping some bomblets, and moving on into our next one, where we got to see some Muron M's get destroyed. And here is the clip. Oh, he finally came up with something new. Look at him.
Yeah, his mind is definitely not right after that one. Definitely not right. He's going to have to go.
Yeah, he's going to have to go. But before he goes, Matthew...
But good luck on your recovery.
But before he goes, Matthew, your mother liked my hot dog.
Oh, my God.
Oh, man. And now he's gone. It's just so... If y'all were kind of tired of the guy, he's gone now. But we had to give him a proper send-off. But anyways, we can see the Ukrainians continuing to destroy the Muron M's in the area. Oh man, now the live chat's going crazy. But that was the third Muron M destroyed, and I just gotta say, beautiful to see that the Ukrainians were able to successfully destroy such a high number of electronic warfare systems in the southern front. But without further ado, we got to get on to business, and that is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the 680th day of the war. Let me make sure to take y'all down to the right speech, and without further ado, here is the peach. Peach!
Speech, please. Give me a speech, Zelenskyy, please.
Oh, they did it! Ew! Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. We're good now.
Дорогі українці, українки, цими днями багато регіонів нашої держави, різні міста і села, райони і прикордонні, і біля фронту, і на всій території зазнали російських обстрілів, масованих ракетних ударів, постійних атак шахедами. Очевидно, що саме цей новорічний час, кінець минулого року, перші дні цього року, керівники держави-терориста пробували використовувати, щоб зламати наш дух та щоб повернути стару минулорічну загрозу. Загрозу знищення нашої енергетики, основ нашого життя. Наші захисники неба роблять все можливе, щоб захистити державу. Вся команда наших дипломатів, усі, хто відповідає за комунікацію з партнерами, українські представники за кордоном, на 100% роблять все, аби забезпечити постачання додаткових систем ППО і ракет до них. Це пріоритет номер один. Звичайно, точно такий же пріоритет номер один – це нові пакети підтримки для наших воїнів. Артилерія, зокрема, калібр 155, засоби РЕП, нові дрони і інше, що необхідно. Вдячний усім нашим партнерам, які вже формують нові пакети підтримки. Буде цього місяця багато відповідної комунікації. Але зараз, сьогодні, я хочу відзначити все ж тих, хто і вночі, і вдень, і в будь-яке свято, і в будь-яких умовах працюють абсолютно всюди в Україні для ліквідації наслідків російських ударів. Сумщина, Чернігівщина, Львів, Одеса, Харків і Київ, Дніпро і Нікополь, Кривий Ріг і Оріхів, Запоріжжя, міста Донеччини, Херсонщина, всюди. Наші рятувальники з ДСНС України, волонтери, які допомагають, наші поліцейські, я дякую всім вам, чия робота – це рятувати людей. Я хочу відзначити особливо рятувальників, які працюють в Києві. Майстер-сержант Дмитро Тарасенко, сержант Антон Дяченко, головний майстер-сержант Андрій Шеляков. Я дякую вам, хлопці. Одеса, ДСНС України, старший майстер-сержант Олександр Дмитренко та полковник Андрій Задоїний. Дякую. Харків, сержанти В'ячеслав Юхно та Олександр Зінченко. Молодці. Херсон, сержанти Євгеній Самілик, Дмитро Мотус. Суми, майстер-сержант Роман Щикот та командир відділення 35-го Державного пожежного рятувального поста Олександр Батюхно. Дякую вам. Також відзначу і працівників комунальних підприємств Сумської області Олександр Решетник та Олександр Дзекелев, Есманська селищна громада. А також я хочу окремо відзначити Тараса Овсійчука, лікаря, дитячого хірурга Херсонської дитячої обласної клінічної лікарні та Юрія Шашкіна, лікаря бригади екстренки, що працює на Херсонщині. Я дякую вам всім за вашу роботу. Працівник поліції Харківщини, лейтенант поліції Валерія Чуркіна. Дякую. Сергій Миколаєнко, тракторист Харківського комунального підприємства, яке задіяно в ліквідації наслідків ударів. Дякую Сергію. Максим Баранецький, Одеська обласна організація Товариства Червоного Хреста України. Володимир Судак, фахівець пожежно-рятувальних робіт, що працює в комунальній установі в Одесі та відзначився в рятувальних операціях. А також Олена Сахарова, волонтерка, загін швидкого реагування Товариства Червоного Хреста України. Дякую вам та кожному і кожній, хто працює заради порятунку життя людей. Ми маємо вистояти проти російського терору та захистити нашу державу. Слава Україні!
And Heroes Slava.
Slava. And I'd like to take a quick moment to bring y'all some severe, well, potentially severe breaking news that apparently, according to unconfirmed South Korean reports, the island of Yeonpyeong in South Korea has supposedly been under a maritime attack from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, otherwise known as North Korea, and they are currently in the process of evacuating the island. We are going to be trying to await to get more information on that at the moment. Right now, it seems as though it's making circles around many of the major news reporting organizations on Twitter, but we have not seen any video or picture evidence to speak of to show what happened during this supposed maritime attack and also the subsequent evacuation that is currently underway at the moment. We'll be waiting for more information on that, and of course, if we get more information while we are live on air, even during this part of the stream, we will be making sure to give y'all the major news that there may be a escalation of the conflict going on the Korean Peninsula. But for now, we will be continuing on with our normal stream schedule of making sure to get to talk to all of y'all and answer questions that y'all have, and also thank the folks who support the channel tonight that helped this channel to be able to run. But with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and because of the sudden breaking news that we've had here and the research I'm doing on it, we don't have a poll to address, sadly. So with that, we are moving right into our Super Chat segment while I continue to research the breaking news that just came out, which is huge news. The first one goes to Kyle Leeson, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Kyle, for that support. And he says, I hope the new term at school is going well, and remember it's a marathon and not a sprint, and C's get degrees, and take one from the live chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Kyle Leeson, and thank you for hoping that our new term as well. It's been going fairly well, at least over these past 2 days. It hasn't been that difficult, and it seems like everything's going okay. This semester, though, I'm like last semester, I always went around and tried to talk to people and everything. This semester, I'm just not even going to waste the energy because folks aren't really at law school to try and even be friendly. I mean, who cares about making friends? Some of them just aren't friendly. And also on top of that, I got a lot of things that I'm trying to work on in the background, the channel, everything else. So I'm like, the last thing I need to do is divert attention, time, and effort into, just trying to, chit chat and socialize. But beyond that, it's going really good. It's been going great. The classes seem to be good. The schedule isn't actually that bad, but there's a fairly big gap in like the middle of our days where we do nothing for like 2 to 3 hours each day, and we just have to wait for the next class. But I will agree with you. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And a lot of people have been saying that. And a lot of people at law school, especially, always are reinforcing the idea that this is no marathon. This is no sprint. It is a marathon. And you have to kind of just take it as it goes and not burn yourself out immediately. And so we are hopefully going to be keeping on doing this. It looks like at the moment we may be moving on back into some news here in a second after I get done addressing this. But C's do get degrees, and everyone at law school that runs this place keeps saying that the people who make C's go on to do great things. I think they're just saying that so that way they can keep on getting tuition money from the people who are making C's, which would be me. It's just so with that, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is a great thing to know that folks like you, Kyle, have been around supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Now, really quickly, we have heard in between when we started addressing that chat and now that apparently it has been confirmed that there was a maritime attack by North Korea on the Yongpyong Island. It has a population of around 2,000 people. It is one of the most westerly islands that is controlled along the North Korean, the Korean border across the peninsula. This is the island in question right here. We can see the small village on it. We can also see the small harbor that they have as well. And from what we understand, we really know nothing about the naval attack at this moment. Some naval attack has occurred, and it has caused the South Koreans to order a complete evacuation of the island. So that could indicate that the situation is very severe, considering that they are going to be moving 2,000 civilians within the course of this next day. We're going to be waiting.
So here's what we know so far. So far, we know that North Korea, and this is confirmed, by the way, by very reputable news sources, not just your Twitter analysts. North Korea has fired about 200 artillery shells off the west coast of South Korea, and it's unclear if they actually struck it or they just fired it over the territory, but it did go at least somewhere in the vicinity of it. They've also told residents to seek shelter immediately and evacuate if possible, and it's happening so fast, there's no response from the South Korean government yet either. But the North Korean ships are apparently right off the coast, and they are still doing something. It's unclear if they're still attacking.
Interesting. We'll be trying to make sure to keep you all up to date on that as we continue to stay on air, probably for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. But the situation is starting to become somewhat serious. Some people are actually saying that there is a casualty report already out of 20 killed and 50-something wounded. We'll be waiting to see if we can confirm if there are any casualties at all. And if so, we will certainly be addressing this in some kind of a special news coverage, most likely tomorrow. If it's incredibly serious and it looks like the Koreas are going into a full-blown war, we will probably extend the stream tonight and try and cover it as much as we can. Of course, we do have to get to sleep to make sure to survive the next day, but we will try and cover this as much as possible if it's becoming incredibly serious. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can right now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Gary Moore. And thank you very much, Gary, for that support. And he says, everyone must hit the like button.
And everyone must You must, if you're watching this channel, you must hit the like button. You must. And I got to thank you all for hitting the like button because it helps this channel to get promoted to more people. And not only that, it makes us really happy to see that people hit the like button as well because it shows us that people actually appreciate what we do. And that's a big part of why we run this channel. We love to know that people do enjoy the effort and the work and the kind of presentation that we make here every single night. And so I got to thank you so much for the support, Gary. Channel legend, old guard. Do I even need to say more than that? And I got to thank you for encouraging everyone to hit the like button because you have been a big part of this channel. I know you're always hitting the like button and you're helping us to keep this thing rolling with your support. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
Okay, we're starting to already get word of a preliminary response from South Korea due to the 200 artillery shells that were fired at the island. South Korea's military is preparing to implement retaliatory measures to respond to it, and that's all they've said. So they're apparently preparing to mobilize their military. It's unclear how they're going to mobilize, maybe soldiers on the ground or ships themselves, but they're preparing a response as we speak. That's obviously very early, and we don't have any details whatsoever, and the South Koreans are probably simply trying to assess what's happened at this point because it's literally fresh news. So we'll have to wait and see what they actually do at this point.
We'll have you all know that apparently the first report of this on the internet was 23 minutes ago, exactly at this moment, from what we can find. So this is literally happening right now live. There, from what we know, are still artillery shells flying over the Yeopyeong Island on the western coast of South Korea, and we are still trying to get more information. So if we need to, we may, and I hope everyone does understand, we may start to speed up our answers to the super chats, and we may actually start a short. Matthew may or may not be here for this, I don't know, because Matthew has to get up really, really early in the morning tomorrow. I really don't have to. But we may start a second stream here in a moment that will specifically talk about the Korean situation if this is starting to become a serious escalation right now. We may be watching the beginning of a second war on the other side of the world as we're running the stream live. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and all of a sudden now the reports are all over the place. We're having multiple different things coming out now, so take all this with a grain of salt from this point forward, because it seems like everyone's sort of diverging off on their own narrative at this point. I'm seeing a couple of sources saying that South Korea is preparing to carry out live fire drills in response to the artillery fire, and I see some folks saying that they're going to implement retaliatory measures. So I'm not sure if that falls in the same category or not. To me, it doesn't sound like it does. But if they fired on the island, I don't know why they'd be doing live fire drills. That wouldn't make much sense. But maybe they're doing a little bit of both. You never know.
I would say that at the moment it seems like some people are trying to get ahead of the game by just guessing. We don't really know a lot about what the South Koreans are going to be doing at this point because that happened. The entire event just happened 23 minutes ago. So going off of that, I would assume that the South Koreans probably don't even have a planned response at the moment. They're probably trying to come up with one right now. So we probably might want to wait maybe about 30 minutes and then check in on that again before we're rounding out the stream, because I'm sure in about 30 minutes we'll actually have a very good idea of what the South Koreans may be up to or maybe doing a response to this attack on Yeopyeong Island. But with that, hope that does address that well, at least at the moment, and we are on to that next one.
And the next one goes to Jose Diaz, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Jose, for that support. He says, thanks to the LSA for the unwavering support to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and Yekaterina Dontsova for president. 2024 is Putin last year. Puerto Rico loves Ukraine and Israel.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Jose Diaz, Commandant of Puerto Rico of the Lee Spring Army. And I got to thank you so much for thanking the entire Lee Spring Army for their unwavering and unquestioning support of Ukraine throughout the entire war. It has been an incredible community through and through, and I gotta say that it is incredible to know that folks like you, Jose, are a part of the Lee Spring Army, and not only that, appreciate the entire army as a whole. I also got to say that hopefully Yekaterina Dontsova can become president. I have a feeling she probably won't. She'll probably go to prison instead or get poisoned. But hopefully 2024 is Putin's last year. Hopefully so. And also, Puerto Rico does love Ukraine and Israel. And thank you so much once again for the support, Jose, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next super chat is going to go to Bo Nielsen, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Bo, for that support. He says, for the Defense Against the Red Menace Fund, and figure I should chip in eventually and not just pitch your contents to people.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And also, Bo, anything is good. My boy Bo. I don't know why I thought about that, but thank you so much for supporting the Defense Against the Red Menace Fund. Here on this channel, we don't subscribe to any of those strange, weird ideologies like fascism or communism. We're down the middle. We're the democracy, folks. It's a good kind of way to be. And also, I thank you so much for chipping in and supporting the channel, because we always are greatly appreciative of the people who support the channel, and we're always hoping that people do, because crazily enough, we do have to live. And I know that's not crazy to you, Bo, but that's crazy to some people out there. Crazily enough, we have to live like other people, and we have to have a job that pays the bills, and this ends up being the job. And I got to thank you so much, Bo, for allowing me to continue running this channel, and also making sure that I can do this as a full-time job, so that way I can dedicate all my time and effort to it. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Bo, and helping this content to keep on rolling, and helping this channel to keep on running as well, because folks like you have helped to make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Neil Vizanot, who puts in a 20, and thank you, Neil, very much for that support. He says, Enforcers, who do you think has entertained more dogs? Chris's mom or the clown's mom?
Oh,
damn.
Sadly, I'd love to tell you that one or the other has enjoyed more hot dogs, but sadly, they're still racking up the numbers as we speak, right? Well, sadly for us, probably not sadly for them, they're still racking up the numbers at the moment. We are still trying to get a tally on that. Wait a minute. Oh, no. Anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support, Neil. I hope that does address that the best we can. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Neil, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be on air asking the questions that count like this one right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that. I know it addressed that the best we can, because I was just by the bus station. I saw both of them down there, and they were working very hard. But with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Space Cat, who puts in a $15 donation. And thank you very much, Space Cat, for that support. I believe that is your first ever super chat of the stream, so a huge shout out to you for that. Is that it's about time that Santa donated, and thank you guys for everything you do, and this is my official account.
And thank you so much, Super Cat, for supporting the channel. And well, Space Cat, actually, not Super Cat, it's Space Cat. But thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us keep this thing running, because I thank you for donating. I thank you for supporting this channel. It means a lot to us. I can't even explain how much it means, because while viewers support the fundraisers, less viewers support the channel, and so any support that we get is absolutely great, because it helps us to be able to run everything behind the scenes. So if it wasn't for folks like you thanking us for everything we do and supporting what we do, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And also, good to know that that's your official account. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Space Cat, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope I was able to address that fairly well. And with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Aaron Shu, also a longtime channel viewer, throws in the $20 donation, and thank you very much, Aaron, for that support. And he says, allegedly, the U.S. Armed Forces Korea is launching aircraft to assist South Korea. And Aaron, I was doing some very quick looking when you put that in the live chat, and I can't find a source in that right now. I'm not saying that I doubt that, because that would seem to be an appropriate response if they've actually fired on the island. So I'm going to keep looking and see if I can spot anything. But in the meantime, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, first off, thank you for the support, Aaron Shu, and thank you for trying to tip us off on the news. Matthew's going to be making sure to look into that behind the scenes, so that way we can corroborate that information. But I got to thank you for sharing that with us live on air right now. Some people have actually been asking in the live chat to use your super chat to answer some live chats about it. Is the U.S. obligated to defend South Korea? We actually are. We have a defense pact with the South Koreans where if they get attacked, we will be there to provide support. So it's kind of, some people are saying Article 5. NATO is not a East Asian thing. NATO is specifically confined, well, what the hell am I saying? Confined to the areas of Europe. Specifically, really anything north of the Mediterranean can be a part of NATO, and anything that is west of the Ural Mountains can be a part of NATO, all the way over to the other side of the Atlantic. This is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But countries in East Asia cannot be a part of NATO. So when they get attacked, it doesn't fall under Article 5. It actually falls under different treaties and pacts that we have, defensive pacts that we have with our allies in that area, specifically South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand, to name off our top allies in the area. So we'll have to be working off of the defensive pact that we have with South Korea, which sadly I can't give you all the name of it at the moment because I can't remember it or even really think about what exactly the pact says, but we do have a defensive pact with the Koreans. So if they're attacked, we will have to come to their defense just by the wording of the pact. It's not a memorandum like the Budapest Memorandum for Ukraine where we can back out. It's an actual full-on defensive pact where we must provide a substantive effort and join the war in defense of South Korea if they are attacked by North Korea. The Chinese also have a similar pact with the North Koreans, a defensive pact where if South Korea and the United States were to conduct an offensive war against North Korea, they would step in and then start to fight on the side of the North Koreans. That treaty has been in effect ever since around 1951, I believe. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well for everyone on what the stakes are involved with North Korea and South Korea. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, just a heads up, folks, I'm seeing here that apparently one of the more reputable news sources out of the Asia area has apparently had to correct something. They were saying that it was an artillery attack. Now they're saying it was a maritime attack. So, you know, I'm not sure where they got the artillery term from because if it was boats, it came from the sea. So I'm not sure exactly what's happening with it, but something clearly is happening because they've ordered an evacuation of the island, and they're also telling people to seek shelter, and they're going to try to retaliate. So right now, it's not really clear exactly how the attack was carried out, nor is it clear exactly what was shot, what was hit, or what was even fired at this point. So take it all with a grain of salt, but something big is happening, and I guess we'll just have to learn what happened in time. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from LSA Sergeant Figment. And thank you very much, Sarge, for that support. And he says, congrats on the Kyiv Post article, and I left a little review on your Twitter post, and I hope it wasn't too harsh. Over, I enjoyed it. A good read. And ready to jump with me yet? And sure, we are. And he says, take one from the live chat, boys, and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment. And thank you for congratulating us on the Kyiv Post article. It's incredible for the channel to finally be recognized, and it was thanks to folks like you that we were able to be recognized. Also, thank you for leaving a little review. We'll check it out. And I'm sure it wasn't too harsh at all. I'll take a look at it. And also, let's see. A good read. Ready to jump with me? Yeah? Sure, why not? I would love to join. I would love to join. Not join, but jump. I'd love to jump. And also, we will make sure to take one from the live chat. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. But what do we got for a live chat, Matthew?
And the live chat question is going to go to Barry Woodward, who says, I just heard that a South Korean island is being evacuated due to North Korean action. And do you know anything else?
At the moment, we know that it's a maritime attack, and Matthew was saying it's somewhat confusing wordage because it's not an artillery attack, it's a maritime attack. But ships can operate like large artillery barges and just use their guns to lob shells onto an island, and that may be what they meant by artillery barrage, and then they shifted it into maritime attack because it may have been a shelling done by a ship instead of by artillery pieces on land, but really it still is all an artillery attack, just a different vehicle doing it. But beyond that, from what we're hearing at the moment, there is some kind of a shelling that has happened on the Yeonpyeong Island that is forcing the evacuation of 2,000 people from the island and onto the mainland. That's really all we know at the moment. We've heard rumors that there's going to be a severe South Korean response or something along those lines, but we just don't have enough information at the moment to really say more than that with clarity. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can at the moment. And thank you so much, LSA Sergeant Figment, for answering that for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so backtrack again once more. This is an official notice from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is a statement from South Korea's military. They're saying that North Korea fired more than 200 rounds from around some time here. Actually, they're not very clear on the times. It's in a different language. But they said in the area of Cape Jingsan, north of some island here, and Cape Mountain, and I can't pronounce any of that. They said there's no damage to our people or military as a result, and the point of impact is the northern area of the NLL. So basically, at the moment, they're saying that 200 rounds of artillery were fired, so it was artillery after all, on the West Sea, they're saying, and nobody was injured or anything like that, but they have ordered that evacuation, and they're saying that's an escalation, and they're still being kind of vague. But that's an official statement, so we do know for a fact now it was artillery fire, and apparently all the other news sources are all over the place, and they actually had it right to begin with.
So going off of this, it seems as though this is not as serious as we thought it was, because we thought that the island was being shelled. They said that the impacts of the shells were actually in the northern area of the NLL, which I believe would be the demilitarized zone of the DMZ. So let me make sure. NLL, Korea terminology. The northern limit line. So let me go type in northern limit line. So here we go. Here's the northern limit line right here. This is the naval boundary of the DMZ that starts, I believe, in the Incheon River and then moves all the way out to the very final islands of this part of the Korean Peninsula. And from what they're saying, these shells landed on the northern side of the NLL. So technically, those shells actually landed inside of North Korean territory and did not end up hitting the island of Yeonpyeong. So luckily, it's not going to be a serious response because no one was killed or injured, and the shells ended up landing in the water on the North Korean side. So going off of this, I'm sure the response is not going to be an armed one. It's probably just going to be a very tense time on the Korean Peninsula, and beyond that, this will probably subside and move on, because stuff like this has happened at least 4 times since the year 2000. In fact, in 2005, there was a actual artillery battle that happened on the Korean border where North and South Korea fired something like 500 artillery shells each at the other across the DMZ, and even then nothing came out of it. So hopefully this is just another stupid provocation by the North Koreans, and it will not turn into anything all too serious. So with that, I hope that does address that as best as we possibly can. It appears that this is not going to be that serious, but if you want, Matthew, you can keep on paying attention to this in the background just in case, if for some reason there's a 180 reversal here within the next few minutes and it is incredibly serious, we'll be able to cover it live. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next super chat is going to go to Skip Tracer 007, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Skip Tracer, for that support. He says, congratulations on being named in the top 10 by the Kyiv Post. You work very hard, both of you, to bring us the news in LSA.
And thank you so much, Skip Tracer 007, channel legend, and old god, for enjoying this channel and also congratulating us for getting into the top 10. It's incredibly cool to know that we were able to do that. And also, thank you so much for appreciating the work that we do to bring y'all the news. We love doing the news. I love bringing y'all the news. It's the funnest thing. Well, fun in some ways, fun not in others. You know, that I've ever done. And I gotta say, it's absolutely incredible to know that folks like you, Skip, enjoy it enough that we're able to continue to do this, and, you know, just know that we will be able to do this until the war is over. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and or LSA! And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ed, who puts in a $13 donation. And Irish Ed, he says, LSA, and hope Fat Boy in North Korea didn't get too upset about your comments earlier in the stream. And topo the day to you lads.
You know, that was crazy. I was literally going through a whole, like, history thing of North Korea and how they were going through constant famine since the 90s. And then we hear that they do some provocative action. Pretty crazy timing right there, because we were literally talking about them earlier. But still.
We called him broke. We said, North Korea's broke. And he said, I'm not broke. I am strong. He lost an attack on South Korea. Damn.
Man, I sat there and got pissed off of that idiot who said, oh, your ego's a little big. You didn't hit 600 yards. And I said, hey, what the hell do you mean? And then Kim Jong-un was like, well, I can fire more than 600 yards. And then he started shelling the northern line. But anyways.
Gotta start launching some hoagies down to the villages or something instead of lobbing explosives. It's like your people need to eat.
I mean, honestly, you're not wrong, Matthew, but you know what else they could be lobbing?
What could they be lobbing?
Insults at John Downey's mom, and I feel like that would be an appropriate provocative action, but nevertheless, thank you so much for your support, Ed, and hopefully the Fat Boy Kiss me, fat boy. Y'all don't know what that's from. Matthew knows, but anyways, you know what it's from, right, Matthew?
I do.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I was hoping it wouldn't be all. Anyways, hopefully he doesn't. I don't think he is, because he almost did it, but he didn't. You know what I mean? It was just right on the other side of the northern line, luckily. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I thank you so much once again for support, and also long live the LSA. And Matthew, did you want a live chat?
Well, let's see. Did he want a live chat? He did want a live chat.
Well, let's get it.
Well, let's get it right now. And John B. Rempel says, is there any truth to the rumor that North Korea is supplying ballistic missiles to all the orcs?
Yes, they are supplying weaponry to the Russians. We were able to confirm that today, and we also got a confirmation from the U.S. government through John Kirby that those weapons are in fact being shipped from North Korea into Russia, and there is now visible proof that they are being used. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is going to go to, well, I hop over here real quick to see it. This one goes to Halligan218, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir. It's a great stream as usual tonight. And how long do you think Ukraine has to prepare for another push near Krynky before the Russians are able to really dig in and fortify their positions?
I think that they have a window of around maybe 3 months to try and push that offensive before the Russians dig in too heavily. So I would say till the end of March. And that means that they may have to actually try and fight through the Rasputitsa, but that shouldn't be that much of an issue. That actually would benefit them, because they're pretty much operating an entirely infantry-based force at the moment, and so the Rasputitsa would only harm the Russians' ability to defend instead of the Ukrainians' ability to attack in that area. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Kevin Burns and also CK Bold. And thank you both very much for that support. And CK said to take a live chat. So thank you very much, CK and Kevin, once again. And the live chat question is going to go to, guess who? It's going to go to Kyle Leeson, who says, at what point do you feel the material losses will impact the Russian ability to hold a front? I am talking materials and not manpower, because of the lack of giving a shite about troops.
Good question, Kyle. It's really hard to say, because I honestly thought that by this point the Russians would be crumbling, and it appears that they're still hanging on. In fact, they're conducting offensives at the moment, so I don't know when they're going to run out of equipment now, because they've really gone on longer than I thought they would, to be honest. So at this point, it could be anyone's guess, but if I had to give you a number, just to give one, I would say maybe another 6 to 8 months, and then they'd probably be out of equipment, or at least modern equipment, and it would be pretty much primarily T-62s and T-55s by that point on the battlefield. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat from Kyle Leeson. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And ding, 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 ding. Breaking news. South Korea has begun to evacuate a second island after the recent provocation. So apparently it's not as minor as we thought it was, and it's apparently being underreported, because they typically, in my opinion, would not do that unless there was something pretty big happening. And also, we don't know what's actually being said behind the scenes. They might have some intel that something major is about to happen, if it hasn't happened already, and we simply don't know about it yet. But one thing's clear, though. Nobody is really certain. I'm seeing the AP reporting one thing. I'm seeing Yonhap and AFP reporting a different thing. And these are all pretty reputable news stations. So for them to have different stories across the board, I don't think really anybody knows what's going on, but clearly something major is happening. And it looks like it could be bad. But obviously don't want to fearmonger yet. We need more information. But Enforcer, would you like to weigh in the meantime?
At the moment, I'd have to go get a historical precedent to see what their evacuations looked like in the past, to say if it's normal or not. So at the moment, I'm going to withhold judgment until I can try and do some more research tomorrow, and then come back with a better idea of what we're dealing with and what the normal response would look like. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Uncle Grandpa, who puts in a 10 and says, goat meat. Pizza on me, fellas. And man, I don't know about that. I'm telling you, that's interesting. He says, thank you for all you do for the LSA family and for Ukraine. And thank you for the corny dad jokes and knowing who Rodney Dangerfield is. And take a question from the chat.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Oh man, I hit 600 yards, and John Downey comes in. He says, "Oh man, I'm telling you, oh my mother, she's a terrible. Well, I can't say that word, but oh man, she's easy, real easy. Oh man, you may have shot 600 yards. She took 600 yards. Oh man, I'm telling you, call her a train because she's like Union Pacific. Oh man, really hauling the freight. Oh man, I'm telling you, hundreds of rail cars run over there. Oh man, I'm telling you."
But nevertheless, thank you so much for the support, Uncle Grandpa, and helping the channel to keep on running. Thank you so much for enjoying the corny dad jokes. I really love corny dad jokes. If other people don't, hey, that's their problem. But I got to thank you for enjoying them, and I also got to thank you for enjoying the Rodney Dangerfield. And not only that, thank you so much for enjoying this channel and the efforts that we put in. It means a lot to us, and I got to thank you for helping this channel to keep on rolling and help you for the support. Well, thank you for the support because you help us to make this thing possible. I mean, we'll make sure to take one from the chat as well. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And the one from the chat is going to go to, let's see here, it's going to go to Paul L., who says, "Do you think that North Koreans are using the war to field test ballistic missiles since they have a hard time testing on their own without starting an international problem?"
I have a feeling that they're probably not, because the North Koreans don't have a lot of weapons procurement or technological development. They're probably just making the cheap ballistic missiles that they always make to try and make a buck so that way they can buy Chinese food. That's probably what they're really doing. But you know, it could be the case that they're also trying to see if their weapons can be tested and see how effective they are when actually put to the test. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, shout out to Marion Deemer once again, who throws in the 10 this time and says, "Internet is still silent." And Marion, I was checking just now, and the internet, you know, it's honestly basically silent because without a consistent story, it's hard to say what exactly is going on. So I guess it is silent in some way. But thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you for the support, Baron. And I would agree, the internet's largely silent on it at the moment, but I will put money on it that if this is continuing on into the next day tomorrow, many, many people will be putting out the World War titles. Hell, we probably will be too, because if it's going on all the way until tomorrow, this may be becoming a serious escalation. But with that, I thank you for the support, and thank you for sharing that with us at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Ben, who says, who doesn't say, he puts in a 5, first of all, and then he says, "Would you proudly serve if there was a draft? If yes, why?" I would serve because it's the law, and also it's the right thing to do. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would serve, 1, because it's the law, 2, because it's the right thing to do, and 3, because it's patriotic duty to answer a draft when you're called up, because, you know, it's just what you do. I mean, you were born and raised in the country. What better way to pay it back than to answer the call to service when the nation needs you the most? That's kind of how I look at it. I think that's how everyone in every nation should look at it, because it's your country. You know, you live there, you grew up there. If you're not willing to defend it, why do you even live there? Why do you live anywhere for that matter? It seems to me, you know, on my level, it seems spineless to not answer the draft and to try and run away. It's cowardice. You know, and I gotta say, it's not like I'm gung-ho to go to war. I mean, war is hell. I've watched it for 2 years. I can tell you personally, it's hell on earth. But you don't have a choice. You know, it's either you face your fears, then you face the idea of maybe dying, or possibly dying, in serving to defend your nation that you grew up in and love, most likely, or run away like a coward and just leave everything behind. And so I'd rather fight for what I have than run away to nothing. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, and I thank you for the support. And before anyone even says, "No, I did not serve," and "No, you do not have to have served in the military to have an opinion on that," because if that was the case, then only the people who could vote in the elections would be people who serve, because that would be ridiculous. Okay, like, I know service is a great thing, but like, I can't stand when people make arguments, like, you know, and it's on something like that, and then you act like people who have not served can't weigh in, you know, or people who have not experienced or done that thing or are that thing can weigh in. It's a democracy and it's a free country. Everyone who wants to weigh in can weigh in, whether they served or they didn't. So that's the way I look at it. If you have a problem with that, sorry, but that's how it is. Because one thing I do not like, and I've seen this happen a little bit in the live chat, is that someone will be like, hey, I don't think I like draft dodging, and then someone will be like, oh yeah, well I served in the army, did you? And then the other person goes, no, then shut the hell up, you can't have an opinion on it. That's just rude, one, and two, who the hell are you to tell people they can and can't have opinions on topics so they can have an opinion on any topic they want? But with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Randy Tosto, who puts in the 5 and says, hundreds of Brads are rusting in storage. And Enforcer, could you use your influence to send them to Ukraine?
I wish we had that much influence. Sadly, I don't think we have that much influence. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much for the support and having some high hopes of this channel. But sadly, I don't think that we would have that kind of influence to get those things rolling. Not one bit. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to None of Your Beeswax, who puts in a 5 and says, Putin is now pissed off at Kim because he can use those, wait a minute, he says, Putin is now pissed off at Kim because he used those 200 artillery shells.
That's maybe, who knows, because it looks like North Korea is wasting some of the artillery shells near Yonpyong Island. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. Wait, what? What are you laughing about?
Yonpyong Island, are you sure that's the way you say it?
Yeah, look. Here, I'll go down here. Look at this. It is Yonpyong Island, right there.
Yonpyong.
Man,
Are
I'm
you sure
not
you're looking
making
at the
this
right
stuff.
island?
Yeah, it's right there, Yonpyong Island. It's
Let me go
literally on
check
all the
something real
Twitter
quick.
posts that you just put up like 5 minutes ago. It's on all of them.
I'm seeing Bang Yangyodo Island. Obviously, I'm not saying that right, but I'm seeing Bangyodo.
Hang on. Let me go to Twitter.
And Yongpyong.
Yeah, Yonpyong
I sound like
Island.
such a redneck saying these names.
Here we go. So I don't even know where the hell that island is. I'm guessing it's the one just south. Let's go see if it is.
It's got a Coast Guard station on that one.
That one just says the Yellow Sea. So the first island that was being evacuated was Yonpyong. It says it in the official, South Korean report. Let's see, the Cape of... Wait, hang on. So there's actually an island north of this one. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. There's an island apparently north of Yonpyong that apparently is being evacuated as well, but I can't find it. And I don't think there is one north of this because that's literally the DMZ right there, just about a mile north. So going off of that, hope that does address that fairly well. It is Yonpyong. And with that, we are on... Well, actually, I don't know if we are on to the next one.
So we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Neil Vizinant, who puts in a 5, and thank you, Neil, very much for our support. He says, is the U.S. obliged to go to war and help South Korea?
Yes, we are obliged to go to war and help South Korea if they are attacked. We have a defensive pact with them, which is an enforceable agreement in pact, unlike a memorandum where it's just kind of like a promise, but you don't actually have to enforce it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our last one goes to Sarab Harsh. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. Hopefully I'm not butchering it. They put in a $5 donation. It's a hi from India.
Oh, and hello there. It's really cool to have someone from India. Really cool. We don't have a lot of viewers that throw in support from India, or really a lot of them that watch from India. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. That is really neat. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and hello to India. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I gotta tell you this, I'm not complaining, like trying to gripe at people or anything like that, but, you know, it always starts every time there's major breaking news, and it comes out mainly on Twitter, because that's the fastest way to get it, unfortunately, sometimes. All the OSINT people and the analysts start fighting and just absolutely slinging mud at each other. Like, I'm seeing them go at it right now. And they're even contradicting the news outlets out here, and they're also interjecting their own opinion. It gets ugly. Like, I'm not bashing the people because they get news out pretty quick, and you know it's helpful, and there's obviously a margin of error in everything, but my God, like, why did they all have to fight to get the story out first? Like, it's so preliminary. Even the government in South Korea really doesn't know what's happening yet, from what I can tell. So, I don't know. Why do these people gotta be like this, Enforcer?
That's all of your little high and mighty folks. Oh, man, I gotta be honest with y'all. After doing this for 2 years, you find out that everyone on YouTube has this complex about them. Almost all of them do. I haven't met anyone who does not have that complex about them, where they have to be right on everything. Like, like they will fight people to be right on stuff. We've dealt with that behind the scenes here. And, and I'll be pretty sure on stuff, but I won't fight anyone over my opinions because they can easily be wrong. But we've had people before tell us, nope, you're wrong. Like I'm not going to say who it was, but we were off air and we were trying to get them on our show, and they ended up coming on eventually. I'm not going to say their name, but, there's only so many people who've been on our show, so you can take a guess. But I was talking about the Abrams being sent to Ukraine. I said, I think the United States may be able to actually provide it, went through all that stuff. And then they said, literally, no, you are wrong. The U.S. would never provide Abrams. It's too difficult and complicated of a tank. It's not even that good of a tank. And then 1 week later, the U.S. announced that we were going to be sending 31 of them to Ukraine, which was kind of like, wow, you were so confident about that to be so wrong within a week and a half. And, there was no, I might be wrong. There was, no, I might be wrong or any humility in the statement. It was just, you were wrong, Enforcer. This is how it is. You don't know nothing. That was almost how it was said to me. And then they were wrong literally a week and a half later. And that happens so much. I mean, I don't mean to critique the entire community, but there are so many people out here who have no knowledge of history. They are just surface level, shallow understandings of the modern world. And then they come in and then act like everything they say is just going to be concrete. It's not. It's even with me having a history degree and having a very good idea, at least in my opinion, of how the world is intertwined and works, I'm not going to say anything as it's a 100% certainty, because nothing is ever 100% certain in this kind of world. Everything could go every way. There's just a high probability they'll do one thing or the other. But the people who do that, I can tell you this, most of them are shams, in what they say, especially if it's their opinion, because they don't have anything to back it up off of or base it on. They're just saying crap because they think it makes them sound smart. And I just don't like that stuff, at all. It just annoys the hell out of me. And I'm not saying we're right on everything too. We've actually been wrong. And I will openly admit that. We have been wrong on things in the past. But that's what part of doing this is, especially if you're predicting anything. You will almost always be wrong a decent amount of the time, because there's no way to predict this stuff with absolute certainty. Even if you are well-versed in history and you have precedents, they may not go with the precedent. So it's all guesswork. And if anyone says anything is 100% certainty in this community, or fights someone and tells them they're wrong over something, that's a factual, well, not really a factual, but a statement of opinion, they're a sham and they don't know what they're talking about. That's what I would say. But with that, I hope that doesn't address that well, in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
And this one is another super chat. This time it's from Philip Fixes LSA, who puts in the 5. He says, Orlando Hood Review, Pine Hills and Hastings. Follow Pine Hills North, and you've never seen so many daycares next to a bail bondsman, he says. Slava LSA.
And Slava LSA. And where is that, Matthew?
Orlando Hood Review, Pine Hills and Hastings.
Pine Hills, Orlando.
And also, by the way, folks, I just saw a minute ago that apparently about an hour ago, a B-1B Lancer crashed in South Dakota here in America. Luckily, all 4 of them ejected and got out, though.
Well, that's good news. That's great to hear. But
big plane.
Yeah, huge, man. And I don't think we have a lot of those. I think we have 50 of them. So that's a pretty major loss to the Air Force right there. And we're not building any new airframes of that either. So each one lost is permanently lost. But let's see. Moving on from that, let's take a look around. I mean, this isn't that bad of a place. This isn't that bad. Chiropractor, though. Ooh, chiropractor. And also, C-Face said you were wrong today on the 3rd largest city. Hang on, we got to go check that. Russia's largest cities. Let's go find the list. Hang on. Oh, dang. I was wrong. You're right, Sife. I was wrong. It's actually Novosibirsk that is the 3rd largest. Yekaterinburg is the 4th largest. And actually by a pretty decent margin. It's almost larger by about another 100,000 people. So that's actually pretty damn shocking. And I gotta thank you for sharing that. This Novosibirsk is in the middle of Siberia too. But getting back to the hood review, thank you for correcting me on that. But getting back to the hood review, this is not that bad. Actually, I wouldn't call this a hood. This is like middle class here in Alabama. Not bad at all. So with that, I gotta thank you so much once again for the support, LSA Sergeant Figman. But I gotta say, hard pressed to find a real hood in Orlando, and y'all are kind of lucky for that. It doesn't look like that bad of a place. At least it doesn't look like it. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, real quick before we move on to our live chat questions, it looks like my prediction might have been accurate about the intel behind the scenes I was mentioning earlier. There's some unconfirmed reports. I must stress unconfirmed because right now it's chaos on Twitter and everywhere else about what's actually happening. But I'm seeing some rumors floating around that South Korea has intercepted some North Korean communications, that they plan on attacking some South Korean settlements on those islands that are being currently evacuated or being told to shelter in place. So that could be why they're taking such drastic action and why it's so serious. Because it looks like right now it might have been maybe live fire drills perhaps, or it could be an attack even. They're still not clear on that. But it appears that they're planning on maybe attacking here shortly. And it looks like South Korea is already moving their stuff into place to go ahead and conduct their own live fire drills in return. So, you know, it looks like it's all happening right now, and it's happening very fast, which is usually when stuff escalates and goes down bad.
Now, Matthew, quick question. Did we cover Aussie Uke's super chat?
Aussie Uke. No, that one just came in.
All right. Well, really quickly, let me make sure that we address this one before we move on into those live chats. Aussie Uke threw in a 20 Australian and said, "Good show today. Congrats on Ukrainian media recognition, and thank you so much for that. And also, North Korea in distraction mode on Putin's behalf." Maybe. I would say that would be pretty crazy if they're going to distract. I don't know what in the world they would be getting in return for that. It's got to be something big if that was the case. But also, thank you so much for enjoying the show today. And also, thank you for giving us congrats on getting into the Kyiv Post Top 10. It means a lot to us. And I got to say that it's great to have folks like you here with us tonight, supporting the channel and helping us to keep running so that way we can keep staying on air and hopefully get us and the community a lot more recognition going on in the future. And so, with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, I was just wanting to double check. Did we get Philip Fix's super chat? Because I'm just wanting to double check.
We did.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. And so with that, we are now moving on into the live chats and the Morse code. We're going to read the Morse code, but after that, due to time constraints, we're only going to be able to get 3 live chats. But with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and we only have 2 live chats to cover, and the Morse code decoders of the stream tonight are Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, Toxic Bananas, Thailand's LSO, and David Millsaps. They said tonight's Morse code reads: Ukraine went all out to beat up the Ruskies today. Long live the LSA. Slava Ukraine, Slava LSA.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 680th day of the war. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to the bearded atheist, who says, if one of the F-16s is downed and Russia gets it in hand on one, are we worried about that at all?
No, we are not at all, actually, because those F-16s are F-16A models upgraded to be a D model technologically, but even then, those aircraft have been airborne since about the 80s. Most of the technology inside of them is something that isn't extremely sensitive to U.S. national security or really Western security whatsoever, so losing one and having them look at the technology would not be a terrible thing. It would just be unfortunate, but it wouldn't really, jeopardize our standing in the world militarily and our cutting edge. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I thank you so much once again for asking a really good question. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is JD Mako23, who says, please show me that damn marmot.
Oh, man, a great way to end the night. Let me go pull up that marmot. Oh, man, we got to go to the Wikipedia. Here we go. Oh, would you like some yum? Oh, man.
Hey, you trying to start a wild bar? Hey, you want to take a swim in the bin? Hello there.
Oh, hello there. Would you like to get socked? Would you like to get a Macus? But nevertheless, I gotta say, I love to see this little thing, this silly plum-shaped looking creature. And wait a minute, hang on, we gotta see if there is an actual marmot, because apparently there's different kinds. And I'm just hard-pressed, y'all, to find a marmot that looks like that thing. None of them do. Well, that one's kind of cute. This one's actually from the Novosibirsk region, which is the 3rd largest city in Russia. But, apparently marmots are actually kind of a common thing. What's their range? Like, where do they live in the world?
Oh, hello there. You think I'm an electric car? I got a range? No.
Let's see.
Can I have a plum?
Hold up. These things live, like, everywhere. The Alps, the Apennines, the Carpathians, the Tatras in Russia.
Yeah, the marmots are taking over. You didn't know.
Dude, I had no idea. They're even in the Rocky Mountains, the Cascades, the Pacific Ranges, Sierra Nevada, Pakistan and India, the Eurasian steppe. So these things are kind of like the more common prairie dog, I'm supposing. But I know that. Oh, I love these little things. But anyways, I hope y'all got y'all's marmot fix of the night, literally at the very end of the stream. And thank you for asking for that, because it's great to have a marmot on air. But with that, it is time for us to round this thing out. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been one hell of a night, a very interesting one, especially with the news going on the other side of the world. And of course, we are greatly appreciative of y'all all being here tonight, hitting the like button, and not only that, being very active. The live chat was going very fast tonight, and we thank you all for really enjoying tonight's stream. And of course, if y'all have not subscribed, make sure to do that, because we run this stream every single day, except for Mondays at the same time every night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, and Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you all for another great stream. And tell your boy over there in North Korea to throw a hoagie to the people and put the grenades down. But anyways, good night.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.